Hello. Today I want to speak about believers' baptism. Believers' baptism. And I'm reading from Matthew 3, verses 13 to 17. Then cometh Jesus from Galilee to Jordan unto John to be baptized of him. But John forbade him, saying, I have need to be baptized of thee, and comest thou to me? And Jesus answering said to him, Suffer it to be so now, for thus it becometh us to fulfill all righteousness. Then he suffered him. And Jesus, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, and lighting upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Now, before Jesus ascended into heaven, he commanded his followers to keep a certain ceremony which would become recognized as the sign, seal, and symbol of a believer's experience. Throughout the New Testament, baptism was only administered to those who, upon confession of their sin, gave a believable profession of faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. The method of baptism was by full immersion. The Greek word baptizo means to immerse. Notice in Acts 8 verses 34 to 39 how Philip baptized the eunuch, a palace official, in the service of Candace, the queen of Ethiopia. And verse 36 of that reading. And as they went on their way, they came unto a certain water, and the eunuch said, See, here is water, what doth hinder me to be baptized? Verse 37. And Philip answered, If thou believest with all thy heart, thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Now it is interesting to note that this verse 37 was actually omitted from the New International Version of the Bible until the Gideons, who are devoted to Bible truth, insisted it be replaced. So we continue on verse 38. And he, Philip, commanded the chariot to stand still, and they went down both into the water, and he baptized him. You see, confession of faith came first. Baptism came second. Now, biblical baptism means a complete immersion in water. And the words sprinkling or pouring are never used for baptism. Christians are divided on the issue. Indeed, in days gone by, many were persecuted and even put to death because they differed from the official state church over its practice of infant sprinkling. So how did sprinkling become a mode of baptism? Now, the first recorded use of sprinkling was in AD 250, when a sick man named Novatian was convinced he was going to die in bed. So he had water poured over him in bed as an act of baptism. For 1,300 years, baptism had always been by full immersion. Perhaps you have seen the adult-sized fonts in some of our cathedrals. And sprinkling was actually forbidden. But as Catholicism began to proclaim that those not baptized would not go to heaven, the teaching arose that baptism was necessary for salvation. No scriptural indication is to be found in the New Testament regarding that. In the 14th century, there was a great mortality rate amongst children. And in AD 1311, the church brought in baby baptism by sprinkling. Sadly, many Christian parents admit that their children, now adults, having received baby sprinkling and confirmation, have expressed no interest in God, salvation, or church-going at all. Indeed, a prison chaplain friend of mine once confided in me, "Bob, our prisons are full of baptized people." It was not until AD 1644 that the Church of England adopted sprinkling by Act of Parliament, which was passed by just one vote. Any New Testament writer had wanted to, if any New Testament writer had wanted to indicate that baptized people were sprinkled, they would have used a perfectly good Greek word, rantizo, meaning to sprinkle. Colossians 2 verse 12, Apostle Paul, speaking of Christ, says, "Buried with him in baptism," going down into the water, "wherein also ye are risen with him," coming up out of the water, "through the faith of the operation of God, who hath raised him from the dead." So, baptism is the outward sign of an inward profession. I'll say that again. Baptism is the outward sign of an inward profession. The Apostle Paul also says in Galatians 3 verse 27, "For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ." Who then is eligible for believers' baptism? Any person who, upon public confession of their sins and profession of faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. That's who. This is why believers' baptism is always preceded by a public testimony from the one being baptized. In closing, I would like to read the testimony of a 44-year-old woman as she recounted her own believer's baptism, recorded in a Christian newspaper some years ago, and I quote, My water baptism was to me a simple matter of obedience, but in it I was blessed 1,000-fold. As the water covered my face, I felt complete peace, quiet and solitude as in death. But when I came out of the water, wow! That first breath was like breathing in a rich, heady wine. I glowed from the tips of my fingers down to my toes, and I almost burst with praise and thanks to God for such a wonderful experience. I really died and came to life again in that pool, and thank God for such confirmation that I am now a new person in Him. Dear believer, perhaps you have never really thought about believer's baptism before. I strongly urge you to consider it now. It is an experience you will treasure for the rest of your life. God bless you.